Sundaram Business presents Humanizing Technology, hosted by Sri Ram Iyer. Hello and welcome to the very first segment of Humanizing Technology. Humanizing Technology is a podcast series by Sundaram Business Services. We seek to connect humans through technology, and of course, we will be discussing the latest trends and impacts on our lives. Well, I'm really thrilled about today's first edition because we will be kicking things off by talking to the head of global sales and marketing at Sundaram Business Services, BK Lester. Lester, a very warm welcome to Humanizing Technology. How are you doing?
Doing absolutely great, Sriram. Thanks. And how about yourself?
Very well, very well. I'm really excited about this.
Great. Likewise.
Okay, now first things first. You're a physics major. Your first job was in the airline industry. You've got a management degree from IIM Calcutta, and now you're into finance and automation at Sundaram Business Services. What has this journey been like?
Oh, yeah, it's been a very long one, Sriram. So I think back in the day, physics was not a well thought through choice, really, to be honest. I think I had options between chemistry and maths at a school level. So physics was a better option. So I opted for physics. And then again, the second option when it came to career again, the airline industry again was not really an option. Those days we had these campus recruitments happening, and it just happened that I had Jet Airways, one of the leading airline industry, that came up for an interview, and the glitz and glamour of the industry was just so inviting. So I just got into the aviation industry right immediately after college. So spent there about 4 or 5 years, and the second choice after the aviation was a thought through decision, because that's when the 9/11 happened and most of us had to make career choices. So many of us kind of left the industry, thought of new career options, and that's when I kind of got into the e-commerce industry, joined a company called Donnelly, which is a large company based in the US. So that's when the BPO industry was booming as well. And then spent there about 8 years, started leading larger teams, spent a lot of time in operations. The operational rigor and metrics kind of came in from Donnelly. Went on to work for a smaller company, a media company called Prasad Group, which was more of a smaller setup, but that gave different experiences. And then came Sundaram. All of these were kind of thought through options. But the key thing is that I was able to connect a lot of dots, because what I learned in physics definitely helped me when I was in Jet, because of some of the work that included concepts of physics being applied. And from Jet, what we learned was the great amount of customer service, and that kind of came a long way until now. And from Donnelly, it was the operational rigor and metrics, like I said, came all the way until even now. And Sundaram, yes, completely a different experience altogether. And thinking and reimagining a whole bunch of things. I am definitely, yes, I mean, one of those prestigious institutions in India. Good that it happened after gaining some years of work experience, because otherwise you're just out of college, you don't have practical knowledge, but it just came after I had some amount of work experience. But what an institution like IIM gives you is just not the curriculum, but a very large network that you're part of, which kind of expands your thinking and all of that. So yeah, it's been a pretty long journey.
Fabulous. No, I'm sure you're just getting started. So this is really good. You're a man of many talents. That is very obvious. Now, I must discuss something. I had to look you up because you're a man of, international man of mystery and intrigue. It's hard to find information about you. And a little birdie told us that you love playing the guitar. So tell us about that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I do love playing guitar, although I've not been really in the professional scene whatsoever. Yeah, active during the school times, spent some time during college as well. Then it took a backseat once I started getting into work and all of that. And then again, during COVID especially, there was a lot of time. So I started to kind of get some hobbies up and running. So yes, definitely. Yes, that's a good relaxation that I use. And now it's more of entertaining my 7-year-old daughter.
That's good. Do you write songs or do you play covers for your little one?
I play. I try to get her play the guitar. I try to make her play the keyboard. So yeah, trying to get that habit or hobby into her as well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Great work. Great work. Now, I hear that you went to Loyola College in Chennai, right? Now, that particular institution is very interesting, especially for me, because of my interest in filmmaking. And many famous Indian filmmakers are alumni from the same college. Now, what is your interest in cinema like, Lester?
Oh yeah, so a lot of filmmakers have come out of the Loyola College itself. The Viscom department back in the day was very popular. I think there were very few Viscom at those times, and especially the one in Loyola was very popular. Yeah, a lot of names from the college that actually came up as good directors of the Indian cinema industry. Yeah, I do watch a lot of movies. I watch a lot of regional films in India, Hollywood. I prefer to kind of stick to thrillers and drama genres. So yeah.
What's the last good thriller you saw?
There was an Indian movie, Drishyam 2.
Oh yes, I did see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's a special movie. Very good.
Right.
Very good indeed. All right. Look, we can't have a podcast during these times without the C word. So COVID-19 has hit the
Right.
world hard. How has it affected you personally and professionally?
Sure. I think there's been a lot of lessons all of us have been able to learn from COVID, and I think probably the best in all of our careers. See, personally, I feel COVID definitely has given me first. I can only think of that it's given a lot of family time, something that was not really there in the sense that I had a lot of travels to make prior to COVID. So I think COVID kind of put a stop to the accelerator, gave us a lot of time to have quality time with people back home. And I think in some sense, it taught us to be the concept of minimalism in terms of what we spend and the stuff that we buy. I think it clearly demarcated exactly what we should have and what are the good ones to have. I think that sort of a thing definitely came from COVID. And professionally speaking, yeah, I think the initial phases we were all caught off guard completely, despite the fact that we had good BCP setup, contingency plans, but no one really envisaged a sort of a pandemic, of that magnitude. So none of the BCP that we had really could really match the sort of magnitude that COVID threw out. So I think, like most companies, we call it as 3 R's, right? The first is basically to respond, and then to be able to recover, and then to be able to reimagine. So that's the same phase that we went through. But the only difference being that all of this had to be done in a very short, truncated time of 3 to 4 months. So we had very less time to respond, recover, and to be able to reimagine. So in the recovery phase, I mean, the responding phase, it was more to ensure that people were kept safe, and we had a lot of measures to ensure that safety of people was on top priority. In the recovery phase, it was all about switching from a complete work environment to a work from home environment to ensure that your infrastructure, IT infrastructure, which was technically not designed to work from home, but we were able to kind of work different ways to ensure that there is no compromise on safety protocols. So we were able to support clients seamlessly during that entire phase. And then came the reimagine phase. So that is where we started to think a little more than just being a BPO. What else can we do? So we kind of forayed into the robotic process automation space. We started to think aloud and feel that we need to not just be just a BPO service provider, but just become a digital transformation company, more of managed services with business process outsourcing and robotic process solutions. So multiple things happened, but I think the key lessons or the central theme that came out for at least for me was the fact that how we can embrace technology at its best, because a lot of solutions were always there in front of us. But until we kind of were pushed to that particular corner, we wouldn't really imagine that such a technology existed and we could do a lot of things. The other component to it is the distributed workforce or the extended talent opportunity that is available, which again was always there, but we didn't really realize. We found we could work seamlessly with people working from their homes. Because otherwise, if for any sort of doubts, clarifications, in a typical office environment, you could just turn your chair and ask the next person. But working from home required a lot of collaboration. Nothing was planned. We didn't really have a structure, but a lot of things like that just emerged, during COVID and even more recently.
Indeed. So adaptability is the name of the game.
Absolutely, yeah.
Indeed. So look, I mean, COVID has presented a number of challenges, and of course, technology is also galloping at a very fast rate. So how should a business of today and of tomorrow adapt to these challenges that are thrown at them?
Sure. Shriram, if you see, there was a survey, I think, which came out somewhere in 2017, 16 or 17 by McKinsey, which kind of involved a lot of C-level executives responding to what their key priorities were when they talked about digital strategies. So I think at those times, 50% of the respondents actually measured cost savings as the key priority for a digital strategy. And there was a severe paradigm shift, post-COVID, where just 10% of the respondents actually rated cost savings as a top priority of running a digital strategy. 50% or more respondents stated that they wanted the digital strategy to be there to ensure that they are competitive in the business. And many of them even went ahead and said they were realigning their businesses around digital strategies. So that's a sort of a paradigm that industries have gone. And you might know the great blizzard of 1978. There's a bit of a story behind that, right? So until then, ATMs were not very popular. But I think the great blizzard lasted for a few days when people could not step out. Institutions were closed, banks were closed. The only technology which was up and running 24/7 were ATMs. And immediately after the great blizzard, I think 20% increase overnight on the use of ATMs. Wow. And ATMs became a popular technology after that. So I'm just saying that, until you get that sort of a push, what you call a tipping point, you don't really realize something like this is of value. And historically, digital disruption, adoption have always been spoken of that, will require a tipping point. I think COVID definitely has given a tipping point of, historical propositions. So having said that, to your question in terms of how businesses should be able to adapt to such changes, challenges, I think more than the technology itself, I think the first thing is to ensure that businesses and business leaders drive an organization of change, culture, and a culture of learning, growth, and change. So until that is there, there is always going to be resistance to change. And you can't really have a top-down approach where you kind of drive a digital strategy without gaining the acceptance. But if you have an organization and if you build a culture which is based on learning, growth, and change, I think your acceptance is already set. So that I think is the first step, definitely. But I think the next best thing is there's a whole bunch of technology in the market, and not everything is what you require. I think you need to sort of align those technologies or kind of assess those technologies against the key vision or the goals that a company has, and ask yourself 3 questions in terms of whether this particular technology that you really want to invest in is suited to the goal that you're actually driving, and whether it will cause any sort of a technological disruption in your process and what that disruption would be. And the third one is basically to ensure that how long the adaptation will take and what sort of an improvement you're going to have. So I think broadly, and I think this should be iterative. It should not be just a one-stop sort of a thing. I think this is an ongoing iterative process that all businesses should keep doing.
Indeed. And look, I was reading, a lot of research articles on how organizations embrace and adopt technology, and the role of the business leader or business leaders is also quite significant. Wouldn't you agree? Absolutely. See, I think it rests a lot with the business leader himself, because it's the vision and the strategy that ultimately has to come top down. But it's a combination, again, like I said, if the first step is always to create that sort of a culture in the organization, and then keep driving your strategy so that you get a good response from the system itself. Brilliant. All right, so the leadership point is a good segue. I'd like to explore the leader, Lester, the leader. So, look, you're a well-established business leader. Okay, I'd love to know a bit more about your leadership influences. Which leaders influence you, and also, give us a peek about how you approach leadership.
Sure. See, I I had a lot of influences, and I don't want to kind of nail it down to very specific or few individuals. I think in the last 20 years of my experience working with 4 different companies, I've got key takeaways from every leader that I work with, and not just the leader. I mean, you find leadership qualities even in your one downs or two downs. Some takeaway has always been there. But if I were to kind of summarize all of that I've learned from my experience and from books that we read and people that are around, I think I tend to lean on, or my style, or the two big aspirations that I have is to a leader should be more empathetic. I think empathy is one of the key things of leadership, because what empathy does is, I mean, in simple definition, yes, we understand that empathy is all about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but it's slightly beyond that, because what it does is that you tend to become a good listener, and it kind of sets you onto a podium where you get a thirst to learn, you want to understand more, you want to be a good listener, hear out people, their concerns. So that, I think, sets you into a wave of knowing more, wanting to learn more, sort of a thing. I think that's a key attribute that a leader should have. Besides, of course, we have a whole bunch of things like you need to have a vision, strategy, and all of that. But I think what really stands firm, one of the things definitely for me personally, is that there should be an empathetic sort of a style of leadership. Yeah. And the next, option, not an option really, but the next aspect is the level of emotional intelligence. Because many more often than not, we find leaders that lean either towards being more creative, innovative, or I think they tend to become more analytical. Because if you are driven either of these corners, then there is a certain sort of a style that you maintain. But if you sort of have a balance between being analytical and being creative, I think that's the right leadership quality, that something that I really aspire to be.
Absolutely. No, well said. Well said. And I believe Richard Branson had talked about communicating with your ears, and I found that to be quite interesting and impactful as well. So, okay, look, they talk about two sides of the same coin. So I'm going to talk about two sides of a coin. One side is finance, and one side is technology. Right? They're often spoken of in the same breath. How do you see the role of automation and process outsourcing in 2021 and beyond? How do you see it shaping up?
Sure. Like I said, two things that came out during COVID that most industries wanted to strive. One is to be agile, and the other one is to be resilient. So I think two broad aspects have really come out. And if you actually take a closer look at it, technology is what really drives these two attributes, agility and resilience. Now, just to take a few simple examples in that space, just take the banking space itself. With the increase of people using digital methodologies and mobile first sort of an approach, there's been a surge in the sort of applications and apps that have come in that particular space. Kind of giving the banking a reconceptualizing sort of a scenario, which is basically also leading to many fintech companies coming up as a third-party provider. So you don't really have banks that used to kind of play the role banks used to do right now. But there's bank kind of becomes a back-end sort of a role where you've got your third-party players like fintech companies using the best of technology and giving a very different experience to customers. And banking as a service is also coming up and is booming. So it's more like it's a cyclic process where you've got a huge amount of digital data footprints that are happening, which is kind of giving you a whole bunch of data points, which technically you cannot really have a manual intervention to be able to decode or to get some sort of insights out of that. So that basically leads into the fact that you need artificial intelligence and all of that to ensure that you're able to kind of take meaningful decisions now that you have a lot of data. So definitely that is something that is definitely going to boom. And even in that industry, a lot of conversational artificial intelligence is something that is going to come up beyond 2021. Now that's just a small gist of the banking sector. Now if you look at a typical corporate, a CFO of a corporate historically is always supposed to ensure that, based on historical records and accounts, he's supposed to be able to account for all those transactions and take a report which is kind of reported to the board on a certain frequency, monthly, quarterly, annually. Now that's sort of shifting, and there is a paradigm shift with outsourcing and process standardizations and innovations and technology. CFOs are able to use the historical data on a real-time basis and be able to kind of make decisions. So that's a sort of a shift that, whether it is banking or whether it is corporate, that's a sort of a influence that technology is making. So earlier we've seen that these things were always there, but when we saw how COVID kind of hit us in the back and when we were completely, caught off guard, that's the sort of a push that it gives. But now that industries have realized what has come out of COVID, technology will definitely become a huge player, in the future, much beyond that to 2021 itself.
Indeed, indeed. All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time and for your wonderful insights and thoughts, Lester. It was a real pleasure. I think we've kicked off humanizing technology really well. So once again, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to many more such discussions.
Thank you, Shriram. Pleasure to be here.